What happened that night changed everything. Because of him, for beautiful.
Not because of like a fear or anything, just because I don't feel like he deserves it, right? Like, I try not to focus my time on this individual.
They always said she was fearless. Kaylee Goncalves had this energy, the kind that lit up a room and made everyone feel safe. She wasn't just another student at the University of Idaho. She was a big sister who fought like hell for the people she loved. But on the night of November 13th, 2022, all of that came to a brutal end. 4 students, gone, no warning, no mercy. Bryan Kohberger, the man now sentenced for those murders, sat in that courtroom without a flicker of remorse. And just feet away, the families he tore apart faced him. One voice, in particular, cut through that silence. Kaylee's sister. What did she say? It didn't just shake the courtroom, it said what so many of us had been thinking this whole time. But in this case, it's so much bigger than that moment. The headlines missed things, dark things, inmate confessions, bizarre internet trails, questions that still haunt the victims' families, and honestly, all of us who followed this case. So stick around, because what was revealed in court, and what we've learned since, is far more disturbing than we were ever prepared for. The victims, who was Kaylee Goncalves. Kaylee Goncalves was more than just a name and a headline. She was the light of every room she walked into, bold, funny, and fiercely loyal. Born and raised in Rathdrum, Idaho, Kaylee was the 5th of 5 children in a tight-knit family that revolved around love, laughter, and loyalty. She was ambitious, studying general studies at the University of Idaho with dreams of seeing the world and building a future on her own terms. Friends say Kaylee was the kind of person who made everyone feel like family, and her bond with fellow victim Madison Mogen was unbreakable. The two were inseparable, almost like sisters. In fact, on the night of the murders, Kaylee had only come back to town to show Maddie her brand new Range Rover. It was supposed to be a night of reunion, not tragedy. But within hours, both their lives would be stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. And for Kaylee's parents, that night never ended. Because the truth about what really happened and why would take months to surface, and even now the full picture is still horrifyingly unclear. And it gets even more disturbing when you find out who Kaylee's family believes was actually targeted. The night everything changed. November 13th, 2022. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Moscow, Idaho, until it wasn't. Sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., a house full of friends turned into a crime scene that would haunt the nation. Inside that off-campus home on King Road, 4 students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were stabbed to death as they slept. No forced entry, no cries for help that neighbors could hear. Just silence, and then blood. The killer moved swiftly, floor to floor, bypassing 2 roommates who somehow slept through the entire attack. It wasn't until nearly noon that a 911 call was made, and by then, it was too late. News spread like wildfire, a quadruple homicide in a college town with no suspect, no motive, and no answers. But for Kaylee's family, the silence was unbearable. They refused to accept vague statements from police. They launched their own investigation, and what they uncovered, including signs that Kaylee may have been the true target, would flip the case on its head. Because this wasn't random, and the person behind it all was hiding in plain sight. Who is Bryan Kohberger? Bryan Kohberger wasn't supposed to be a suspect. He was a 28-year-old PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, studying the very psychology of killers, while allegedly becoming one himself. On paper, he looked like any other academic. Quiet, methodical, socially awkward. But behind that thin layer of normalcy was a man whose behavior raised red flags long before the murders. Former classmates described him as controlling, arrogant, and disturbingly fascinated with serial killers. In fact, months before the crime, he posted a chilling Reddit survey, asking convicted criminals how they felt during their crimes. Questions that, in hindsight, read like a killer preparing to act. And after the murders, instead of disappearing, Kohberger kept going to class, showing up like nothing happened. But the investigation was closing in. Cell phone pings, surveillance footage, and DNA from a knife sheath left at the scene all pointed straight to him.
Ash recovered from the Kohberger family home was tested for DNA, and it matched DNA found on the sheath. Former Philadelphia Police Chief Charles Ramsey isn't involved in the case, but thinks it's a strong one.
Still, even now, Kohberger maintains his innocence, sitting stone-faced in court as the families of his alleged victims relive their worst nightmare. But if you think that's the most disturbing part of his story, you haven't heard what his former jailmate just revealed. The arrest? A killer caught? For nearly 7 weeks, the families of the victims and the entire country waited in fear. No arrests, no official suspects, just unanswered questions and growing frustration. But then, on December 30th, 2022, everything changed. Bryan Kohberger was arrested in Pennsylvania, nearly 2,500 miles away from the crime scene during a pre-dawn FBI raid at his parents' home.
Say the surveillance team also saw him wearing surgical gloves several times, and they witnessed him putting trash in a neighbor's garbage can at 4 in the morning.
The public was stunned. How could a criminal justice student, someone supposedly trained to understand criminal behavior, be accused of carrying out one of the most calculated mass murders in recent memory? Authorities had quietly been building a case. DNA on a knife sheath left at the scene, surveillance footage of a white Hyundai Elantra circling the area, and cell phone data showing suspicious movements. It all pointed back to Kohberger. Even his own phone had mysteriously gone silent during the exact window of the murders. But this arrest raised as many questions as it answered. Why did he do it? Was it random? Or was Kaylee the true target? And perhaps most chilling of all, what would he have done next if he hadn't been caught? Because for a man who studied how criminals think, Kohberger may have believed he was smarter than everyone else, until he wasn't. Behind bars, what inmates revealed. Inside the Monroe County Correctional Facility, where Bryan Kohberger was held before extradition, whispers started to spread, not just about what he allegedly did, but about how he acted behind bars. To the outside world, Kohberger was a silent, brooding figure, but inside jail, inmates saw a different side, one that was unsettling in its own way. According to one former inmate, Kohberger was annoying, obsessively pacing his cell and asking bizarre philosophical questions. He reportedly bragged about knowing if he'd get away with it, and even asked guards if they'd ever heard of the Idaho murders, as if testing how far his infamy had spread. He had strange eating habits, refused to shower regularly, and kept his eyes locked on people with an eerie calm, like he was studying them. This wasn't just antisocial behavior. To some inmates, it felt like he enjoyed being locked up, as if he was still observing the system from the inside, like it was one of his research projects. But even with the walls closing in, Kohberger never broke. No confession, no apology, just silence, and that haunting stare. The sentencing, a moment of fury and truth. The courtroom was silent. All eyes were on the man accused of slaughtering 4 innocent students in the dead of night. And for the first time since that horrifying November morning, the Goncalves family got to speak directly to Bryan Kohberger. What followed wasn't just a victim impact statement. It was a release of rage, sorrow, and years of bottled-up pain. Kaylee's father, Steve Goncalves, stared Kohberger down and called him exactly what he believed he was, a coward and a monster. He didn't hold back. His voice shook with fury as he described the devastating loss of his daughter, the sleepless nights, the shattered dreams, and the family forever broken. Her sister, Olivia, took the microphone next, and her words cut deep. She painted a picture of who Kaylee was, joyful, fearless, full of life, and robbed of everything by a man who sat emotionless just feet away. Kohberger didn't flinch. No apology, no reaction, just that same cold stare. But for the Goncalves family, this was a moment of truth, a final chance to remind the world that Kaylee was not just a victim, she was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and her voice through them was finally heard. Kaylee's sister speaks, the courtroom explodes. When Olivia Goncalves took the stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She wasn't just speaking as a grieving sister, she was speaking as the voice of a girl whose life had been violently stolen. With tears in her eyes and fury in her voice, Olivia didn't hold back. She described the horror of waking up to news no family should ever hear, the torment of unanswered questions, and the unbearable silence that followed Kaylee's death. But then, her words turned sharp, aimed directly at Bryan Kohberger. She called him the scum of the earth, a coward, and someone who didn't even deserve to speak her sister's name. Her words were raw, cutting, and unfiltered. The judge had to intervene as emotions boiled over. Members of the gallery sobbed, others gasped, and even some officers looked visibly shaken. But Olivia stood firm, refusing to be silenced. In that moment, the courtroom wasn't just a place of justice, it became a battlefield of grief, rage, and truth. And through her courage, Kaylee's memory roared back to life, louder than ever. But Bryan Kohberger, he wanted to be remembered, to outsmart the system, to leave his mark. In the end, all he'll be known for is being exposed by the very people he tried to silence, the victims' families, relentless investigators, and a nation that refused to look away. But this story isn't over. The questions haven't stopped, and this won't be the last time Kohberger's name sparks outrage, fear, or justice. Stick around, because what's coming next might be even darker than what we've already uncovered. If you want to stay updated on every twist still unfolding, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video. Help us keep the victims' voices alive, because justice isn't finished, and neither are we. See you in another video,